With over 55 leaders in Civilization 6 who are the top 10 culture leaders in the game. We've already done domination and science, so let's take a look at the top 10 best culture leaders in the game, which will have the world wearing blue jeans and listening to rock music in record time. We have an honorable mention up first with Kupe and the Maui taking the first spot. Kupe starts in the middle of nowhere but gets huge bonuses when founding a city, not quite deity AI levels but still really great, letting you pick your starting location to a certain extent. As long as you don't wait for the next ice age to settle your capital, it's worth it for the most part. Not only that, but you do get bonuses for just not touching forests and even rainforests, and the secret Maui technique of making fish thicker with a capital C allows them to get more food per fishing boat, giving them some of the best coastal growth in the game. But there's a catch. They're not literate. These guys cannot write, and thus no great writers nor their great works can be used, which is devastating and a huge reason why they're not in the top 10. The bulk of most early game culture and tourism for the most part comes from great writers, and without them, you're really hindering any progress you can make early on with tourism. But it's not all shit skies and depression horizons, because they have a unique amphitheater replacement, the Mirai, giving all the city tiles with a passable terrain like forests and rainforests, and even natural wonder tiles, +1 faith and +1 culture each, which becomes tourism after researching flight. Is this better than great writers? It depends on the level of terrain and cities you have, but early on it isn't necessarily, since you don't get the tourism until Bin Laden becomes a threat, and unlike Babylon, the Maui cannot research a technology like flight in the ancient era. Overall, I'm fairly certain that after flight, their abilities really kick in, but because of their debuff in the early game, I'm going to give them the first honorable mention slot, although you can definitely have the world listening to your Maui music and wearing your shoulder furs if you play them right. The second honorable mention is Eleanor leading both France and England in Civilization 6. Now, Eleanor herself doesn't have anything that helps with culture necessarily, considering she just uses the press to distribute the news of big titty goth girlfriends in Eleanor's lands, causing an immediate rebellion, giving her more cities and theoretically more great works, but nothing directly linked to a culture victory unless she's France. And then she gets wonder bonuses in the medieval, Renaissance, and industrial era for every wonder up to 15%, and cake-filled chateaus, which gives her tourism after flight, and even early on gives her a lot of extra gold and culture to both use to hopefully stave off any other French revolutions and to give her some nice advantages in buying buildings in the early game while giving her some culture to go through the tech tree in the mid game. But England gets even less. Although with England's gold generation with the Royal Navy dockyards, you can definitely engage in corruption and buy other leaders' great works, but that's really an indirect way, and without any direct tourism or cultural abilities you can rely on, unless you're playing France, it's difficult to put her on a top 10, so I just decided I'll have both Eleanors in the honorable mention slot, although French Eleanor is definitely in the top 10, and can definitely have the world eating your baguettes with cheese and exploring your Eiffel Towers and Ardennes forests in no time. That is, if they live long enough to see it happen. And Eleanor doesn't just win a domination victory before then. Pericles has nothing to tourism whatsoever. No one's gonna come to Greece to watch the man who has the helmet the mountain wore in Game of Thrones and the gold-encrusted toilet paper he's wearing over his back. That, and he only has abilities that help with culture, not tourism generation necessarily, and because of that, I can't put him too high, but with the Acropolis being cheaper to build, as well as giving him extra envoys, and the 5% culture from each city-state suzerain you are suzerain of, not to mention the incentive you have to build the Acropolis everywhere, you're already going to be in the lead culturally in the early game, and with all the great writers you'll be getting with all the Acropolises and all the amphitheaters, you will be able to get a nice tourism lead earlier on. You get about 5 city-state suzerains, which isn't anything too crazy as Pericles considering all the envoys. That's a 25% bonus to all culture throughout your entire empire, which is insane. Not only that, but the wildcard slot can house 2 great writer points policy card, giving you another indirect bonus to tourism, so despite the fact he only has cultural bonuses and not touristic ones, those early bonuses can help you blitz through the tech tree and get to the later civics like conservation for national parks, perks, rock bands to get to other civs to get big bonuses towards tourism, as well as later governments for more great people points from the extra wildcard slots these extra governments will give you. The only thing you'll need that Pericles doesn't have an advantage towards is radio on the science tree to put great musicians in those radio towers, but at the end of the day, even without that, you have so many bonuses to just culture that it makes tourism a lot easier and will help you get the world to read your Greek god mythology and wear your tunics in no time. China has so many abilities in the early and mid-game to get that tourism up and running. I almost feel bad for leaving them in the number 9 slot, because they really are good bonuses, but do require some luck. The builder charges into wonders are great, but even with the extra build charge, you will need the pyramids to be able to build every wonder with one builder, and if not, you're going to need to mobilize more builders. And that's not even considering the human rights violations this would cause, although good on Firaxis for making sweatshops a thing in Civ 6, I guess. But the more pressing matter is the units, districts, and settlers you'll need in order to just get the ball rolling in the early game. So China is definitely top 5, at least below Emperor, but above that, with the AI getting the Great Bath in 20 turns, insane bonuses to Eureka's, as well as production and their tendency to grab every wonder in sight, I wouldn't put them too high because of that, but we aren't done yet. The Great Wall is just like the Great Wall in real life, offering no protection whatsoever from the Mongol hordes, but the cultural and monetary benefits are enormous when played right. The Great Wall gets 2 gold and 1 more from each adjacent segment of the wall, which requires builder charges. And then you get more culture and tourism as you advance throughout the tech tree, which is extraordinary if you can get those walls everywhere you can, and if you have the population to work all these tiles. By the time you get to flight, like all other improvements that provide culture, the tourism you get from the Great Wall is more than enough to dominate the rest of the way, as long as you're able to work these tiles with your population. The only thing I'd warn about is to not do anything too crazy in the early game. You don't need every wonder in the game you have to get the economy up and running, but getting 4 to 5 earlier on is more than enough, giving you eventually up to like 20 tourism total from those wonders alone, getting some of that early game tourism and being able to work on the rest of your civilization to secure the culture victory by getting people to listen to your Guai Yui, I don't know, it's ancient Chinese folklore music, I'll just put it on the screen, and wear your silk garments in no time. You see this absolute Giga Chad, one stomp and we need to send aid to Japan and Haiti again. Look at him taking supersonic punches to the stomach, a true civlifer subscriber, allowing his enemies to get their hits in to assert dominance and let them know resistance is futile. Is there any world where this guy's packing less than 15 inches? Here's live footage of Senator Armstrong hitting that subscribe button and the power up that ensued. By leaving a like and subscribing, you too will grow 7 feet, gain 15 inches where it matters, and 2, more importantly, not miss out on future content. The number 8 spot goes to Cleopatra as long as Rome isn't in the game. There are really 2 abilities in Egypt's kit that are similar to what China has, but in my opinion are a little better overall. The first is the 15% production bonus towards wonders and districts near rivers, which is a little more limited in the placement than China's abilities, but they can also be used for wonders past the classical era, and for districts even, which is huge when you're trying to build theater squares everywhere. This ability overall is far better than China's, considering even rivers are almost everywhere, so it isn't too much of a restriction, and you don't need to spend production on builders early on that can stifle your economy, since, you need builders, and then you need to build the wonder for China, whereas Egypt can work on other things before they get started on the wonder building. The Sphinx, however, is a little bit of a downgrade from the Great Wall, getting faith and culture, which is more if it's next to a wonder, or more culture if it's on floodplains, as well as more when natural history is discovered. It's great, no doubt about it. And with flight and the tourism bonus, it's still really good, but the problem isn't necessarily the tourism and faith numbers, it's the fact that China's gives gold earlier on, which is a lot, up to 4 gold per turn for each Great Wall if they're adjacent to 2 others. Egypt gets faith, which is better later on for rock bands and natural parks and stuff like that, but earlier on, give me the gold more than faith. In the grand scheme of things, Sphinx and Great Wall are similar enough that Egypt's wonder production easily takes over China's over the course of a game, not to mention the extra district bonus she gets, really leaving Egypt well ahead of China, and with that, you'll have people reading your hieroglyphics and wearing your can't believe it's not Greek attire by the end of it. Vietnam is a menace to society. Culturally, their abilities are amazing, which is par for the course with the new Frontier Pass. You get 1 culture in woods for every district placed there, not to mention the rainforest for science and marsh for production bonuses, which are huge depending on what you need, but with your defensive bonuses in the early game, you're pretty much unconquerable. Just build an archer and you're done. Good night. Game's over. No one can stop you. With that, you can focus more on your economy and the fan. The unique district you get that replaces the encampment doesn't give great general points and isn't a specialty district, meaning you don't have to use Vietnam's restrictive things where you have to put them on rainforest, forests, and marsh, and they can be built pretty much anywhere. The fan gets 2 culture for every adjacent district. Not hard to surround them completely, considering it isn't a specialty district and can be built everywhere, and with forests being planted from medieval fairs as another one of Vietnam's abilities, you'll be able to surround every fan in the game fairly quickly, giving you up to 12 culture for each one. The biggest thing about this bonus is the fact you can get up to 12 culture. Right? 6 district adjacencies times 2 gives 12, which after flight, all that culture becomes tourism. So if you have 10 cities and surrounded thons in each one, then guess what? You got 12 tourism times 10, giving you 120 tourism. That's not only quick maths, but that's pretty much free by the time you research flight, which is more than enough to take over the game and win a culture victory by getting people to view your jungles and listen to your underground networks on patrol in record time. Number 6 on the list is going to be Japan. Hojo isn't really a culture leader more than an I'll kick your ass in any victory type of your choosing leader, but his bonuses are best suited for a cultural victory. Firstly, Meiji Restoration gives Japan +1 adjacency for each district for all their districts, meaning theater squares, the hardest districts to get adjacency for in most games, get a free +6, and in most games if you have an entertainment complex, +7 extra adjacency in the early game, and that doubles to +12 and +14 after you get the theater square adjacency policy card. This alone is good enough to give Japan all the culture you need, not to mention they get a bonus towards building theater squares and holy sites, which are the second most important districts for a culture victory, so overall these guys are set. But the thing that really pushes them over the top is the electronics factory, giving them another 4 culture from each factory after researching electricity. Everything combined leaves Japan as one of the better culture civs in the game, giving them the ability to blitz past the tech tree and get the faith they need to get the world to watch their anime and eat their sushi. At the number 5 spot is the Khmer, with abilities focused on growth at any cost. They have more in common with Activision Blizzard than any leader in Civ 6, but that's not the point. The Percent is the only tourism benefit they have, but it is huge. It gives a flat 10 tourism at 10 population and 20 tourism at 20 population for this temple replacement, meaning you'll be building holy sites and should try to get a religion. With the River Goddess Pantheon and the Holy Site Aqueduct farm bonuses, you have more than enough faith and food, and you'll have an insane amount of growth leading to an absolutely disgusting, wretched amount of population, leading up to 200 tourism for free, way earlier than most sources if you have 20 population by turn 100, or by 10 cities, excuse me. You will also need, of course, to work on getting amenities, but a couple entertainment complexes as well as luxuries should be good enough in most games, and River Goddess does give amenities and housing, so you can have the world visiting your unique architecture and view your beer belly in no time. The Kongo have one ability that blows the rest of this game out of the water, and that is Kissy. Not only do you receive 50% more great artists and musicians, not to mention great merchants, but that's not important here, but every great sculpture, relic, and art piece artifact gives food, production, faith, and gold with up to 5 great work slots for your capital alone instead of the usual 2. Overall, this ability takes a while to kick in. You don't get any great writer bonuses, and unless you get Yerevan, it really doesn't matter if you get apostles per great theater square building if you can't get martyr, and help you get those relics. However, if you can do that, then the game is over and you've pretty much won. But the Kongo and their great people bonuses, along with their extra benefits, give you incentive as well as bonuses to great people generation, making even the policy cards a little bit better with +3 great artists rather than +2, for example, being a substantial boost, giving the Kongo a big enough bonus to great people to give them the number 4 spot, being in prime position to get the world to equip your peacock headwear and spread their religion quickly enough. Canada is a little weird with their cultural, diplomatic, synergistic type benefits, but they're still great with going just culture in Civilization 6. Starting with the obvious, they can work Tundra later on, even better than Russia, but they're not as good as Russia when it comes to early game Tundra buildings, however. Their abilities with 4 Faces of Peace gives you more Diplo favor from emergencies, as well as just raw tourism being more than enough to get some of the more favorable culture Congress sessions, like more great artists or even banning great musicians if you're behind, for example. But the ice hockey rink is fantastic, giving you 1 amenity and 1 culture for every adjacent tundra and snow tile, with another 4 culture if near a stadium in the most meme-worthy unique improvement in the entire game. But the fun doesn't stop there. With +2 appeal to adjacent tiles, meaning the Mounties and their National Parks ability can be used to their fullest extent. The thing with Mounties is now you can build and buy natural parks with things other than Faith. This means you can ignore Faith for the most part unless you want rock bands later on, which you probably will, but we'll just ignore that for a minute. And you could just use Mounties with +2 charges each to build the national parks for you. And if you are going for Faith, that allows you to save up a huge amount for just rock bands in the later game, instead of having to separate them between rock bands as well as national parks. This alone is enough to leave Canada as the 3rd best civ, both for their cultural and touristic abilities, and not to mention their early game defense with knowing being able to declare a surprise war against them, and growth potential in the tundra gives them more ideal locations for ice hockey rinks as well as national parks, and them not needing to build too big of a military earlier on. This altogether gives them the tools they need to get the world to eat their poutine and play their ice hockey. The penultimate spot goes to Catherine de Medici, the cosplaying one. Pretty much the same abilities as France with the Chateau giving you culture and later on tourism, and the medieval Renaissance industrial wonder spree all being yours to keep, another benefit, but what separates Catherine from really everybody except our number 1 spot is going to be the court festival leader ability. It's an expensive project, I know, but what you get from it is well worth it. Firstly, you get +2 culture from plantations if they're adjacent to either a theater square or chateau. That one is obvious and really good, no doubt about it. However, it isn't +2 culture from each theater square. If you have 2 theater squares near 1 chateau, they'll still only, or plantation, they'll still only get +2 culture, not +4. It's not additive. But the Court Festival project takes all your luxuries as well as copies of luxuries, throws them in a pot, stirs them up a little before giving out a huge blast of tourism to every civ in the entire game. This isn't some mini burp induced by just a sip of a carbonated beverage either. It's a massive held in for months powered by McDonald's Sprite with mixed meth in force that'll blow everyone in the world away with so much tourism that most games you'll only need 2 to 3 of them to win the game, as long as you grab as many luxuries as you can muster, even traded ones. This alone puts Catherine in the number 2 spot, and while it's not good enough to give her the number 1 slot, it's still perfectly capable of getting the world to drink your wine and letting them eat cake. Number 1 isn't even close. It's really the difference between number 2 and 10, honestly. This right here, Russia, led by Super Wario, is by far the best culture civ in the entire game, no questions asked. It's not even close. Don't believe me? Look at the Lavra being guaranteed a free religion, good enough to get a cathedral maybe, as well as World Church and a Dance of the Aurora-powered work ethic, you're good to go. But you get 1 great writer point from shrines, 1 great artist from temples, and 1 great musician points from your worship buildings. Yep, pack it in, it's over. You only need to get double the amount of great people points for a culture victory, but not only that, you get them earlier, sooner than any other civ in the entire game, giving you such a huge advantage that I personally always get at least 95% of all great works available in the game, not only filling out your slots as soon as possible, but also preventing the AI from competing in tourism or culture themselves, as they won't be able to get any great people, especially if you try hard, faith buy everything with your Lavras, all the great people the AI might steal from you, and plug in all the policy cards that give great people points. It's just sensational the amount of great people you can get, and with Russia being a religious focused civ in the first place, you will have more than enough faith to build national parks and rock bands, although at this stage you should have already won the game by turn 200 on a bad day, getting the world to drink your vodka and wear your Adidas track pants. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the description, and follow our Discord where shenanigans is a daily occurrence, and check out this video in the top right corner. Peace.